Canada's reputation for politeness and quality of life masks some harsh urban realities that might shock you. In 2025, 1 in 4 Canadians live in cities where housing costs devour 60% of their income, crime rates soar above national averages, and basic infrastructure crumbles under neglect. Are you curious which cities have residents questioning their future? Let's explore the 10 worst cities to live in Canada this year, starting with a border town where economic struggles have created a perfect storm of urban decay. Windsor, Ontario. Windsor sits just across the Detroit River from one of America's most troubled cities, and that proximity has created a perfect storm of economic and environmental challenges. This border city of 330,000 residents faces an unemployment rate of 7.2%, nearly double the national average, while its economy remains dangerously tied to an automotive industry that's been hemorrhaging jobs for decades. The air you breathe in Windsor tells the story of industrial decline. Environmental monitoring stations regularly record air quality readings that exceed federal guidelines, largely due to pollution drifting across from Detroit's industrial corridor. Residents report higher rates of asthma and respiratory issues compared to other Ontario cities, with children particularly affected during summer months when smog levels peak. Economic diversity remains Windsor's Achilles heel. Despite efforts to attract new industries, nearly 40% of local jobs still depend on automotive manufacturing or related services. When Ford announced layoffs at its Windsor engine plant in late 2024, over 2,000 families faced uncertain futures. The ripple effect hit local restaurants, retail stores, and service businesses that depend on steady automotive paychecks. Perhaps most telling is the brain drain plaguing Windsor's future. Statistics Canada data shows that 60% of University of Windsor graduates leave the city within 5 years of completing their degrees, seeking opportunities in Toronto's tech sector or other growing industries. Young professionals describe Windsor as a place where ambition goes to die, trapped between a declining industrial past and an uncertain economic future. The city's proximity to Detroit was once its greatest asset, but today it feels more like a burden that weighs down every aspect of daily life. While Windsor continues to battle these economic headwinds, there's another Ontario city where geographic isolation creates entirely different but equally devastating urban problems. Thunder Bay, Ontario. Geographic isolation can turn urban problems into urban nightmares, and Thunder Bay proves this harsh reality better than any other Canadian city. Located 5 hours from the nearest major center, this northwestern Ontario city of 108,000 residents holds the grim distinction of having Canada's highest homicide rate at 5.3 murders per 100,000 people, more than double the national average. The numbers paint a disturbing picture of a city in crisis. Thunder Bay's violent crime rate has surged 28% since 2020, with drug-related violence driving much of the increase. Downtown Fort William, once the heart of the community, now features boarded-up storefronts and empty lots where thriving businesses once operated. Local police report that nearly 70% of violent crimes involve substance abuse, creating a cycle of addiction and violence that seems impossible to break. But crime is just one symptom of Thunder Bay's deeper problems. The city's median age has climbed to 43, significantly higher than the provincial average, as young people flee for opportunities elsewhere. You can see the aging population's impact everywhere. Schools closing due to declining enrollment, a shrinking tax base struggling to maintain basic services, and a workforce that's literally dying off faster than it can be replaced. Infrastructure decay follows close behind. The city estimates it needs $400 million just to bring roads, bridges, and water systems up to acceptable standards. Winter temperatures that regularly hit minus 30 degrees Celsius accelerate the deterioration, creating potholes that swallow car tires and water mains that burst with frightening regularity. Thunder Bay's problems stem from its remote location, but isolation isn't the only factor that can destroy a city's livability. Sometimes being connected to major transportation networks and sitting in the heart of a populous region creates entirely different pressures that can be just as devastating to residents' quality of life. Winnipeg, Manitoba. Being well-connected doesn't shield you from urban decay when crime and climate conspire against daily life. Winnipeg, Manitoba's capital and largest city with 750,000 residents, sits at the crossroads of Canada's transportation networks. Yet this connectivity hasn't prevented it from becoming one of the country's most dangerous places to live. The crime statistics are genuinely alarming. Winnipeg's violent crime rate stands at 40% above the national average, with robberies and assaults occurring at rates that would shock residents of supposedly rougher cities. In 2024 alone, police recorded over 15,000 property crimes, including a car theft epidemic that saw vehicles stolen at twice the rate of Toronto, despite having half the population. Downtown Winnipeg tells a story of a city under siege. Business owners on Portage Avenue report installing security systems costing thousands of dollars, only to watch break-ins continue unabated. The Exchange District, once a vibrant cultural hub, now empties after dark as residents avoid walking alone. Even during daylight hours, you'll notice the defensive posture of people hurrying between destinations. Then winter arrives like a sledgehammer to an already battered city. Temperatures regularly plunge to minus 30 degrees Celsius, creating a brutal 5-month season that tests human endurance. The extreme cold doesn't just freeze pipes and crack pavement. It isolates people in their homes, strains emergency services, and adds hundreds of dollars monthly to heating bills for families already struggling with crime-related security costs. The combination proves devastating. Young professionals describe Winnipeg as a city where you constantly look over your shoulder in summer and hide indoors all winter, creating a quality of life that feels more like survival than living. While Winnipeg struggles with these twin challenges of crime and climate, there's another city where natural resource wealth was supposed to guarantee prosperity, but has instead created different forms of urban misery. Sudbury, Ontario. Resource wealth was supposed to guarantee Sudbury's prosperity, but this northern Ontario mining city proves that boom and bust economics can devastate communities for generations. Once home to 170,000 people in the 1980s, Sudbury has watched 25% of its population vanish as the mining industry that built the city slowly crumbles beneath changing global markets and automation. The exodus tells a heartbreaking story of economic decline. Statistics Canada data shows that 68% of Sudbury's university graduates leave within 3 years of completing their education, seeking opportunities in cities where careers aren't tied to commodity prices and underground operations. Entire neighborhoods now feature more for sale signs than occupied homes, creating a real estate market where houses sit empty for months despite rock-bottom prices. What remains is a city struggling to reinvent itself while battling the environmental legacy of a century of intensive mining. The famous Sudbury Basin, once so barren from sulfur emissions that NASA used it to train Apollo astronauts for lunar missions, has seen remarkable ecological recovery, but soil contamination still affects property values and development options across large sections of the city. Cultural amenities reflect the economic reality. Sudbury offers few entertainment options beyond a single movie theater complex and limited dining choices, creating a social landscape that feels decades behind comparable cities. Young families describe a community where weekend activities involve driving to other cities, making Sudbury feel more like a way station than a destination. The mining industry's decline has created a vicious cycle. Fewer jobs lead to population loss, which reduces tax revenue, which limits city services, which makes Sudbury less attractive to potential residents and businesses. While Sudbury grapples with its post-industrial identity crisis, there's a maritime city where being a tourist destination and regional hub hasn't prevented similar economic freefall. St. John, New Brunswick. Being a tourist destination and regional hub means nothing when your economic foundation crumbles beneath your feet. St. John, New Brunswick's largest city, has watched its population shrink by 8% since 2010, dropping from 70,000 to just 65,000 residents as economic opportunities evaporate and young people flee for greener pastures in other provinces. The infrastructure crisis alone would bankrupt most municipalities. City engineers estimate that St. John needs $2.1 billion just to bring its roads, water systems, and public buildings up to acceptable standards. You can see the decay everywhere. Potholes that swallow entire car wheels, water mains that burst weekly during winter freezes, and century-old buildings literally crumbling from neglect and salt air corrosion. Employment prospects paint an equally grim picture. The closure of major employers like the St. John's Shipbuilding Yard and ongoing struggles in the forestry sector have left the city with few opportunities beyond service jobs that pay barely above minimum wage. Recent graduates from the University of New Brunswick describe St. John as a place where ambition dies, forcing them to choose between career prospects and staying near family. The youth exodus has reached crisis proportions. Statistics show that 43% of people aged 18 to 34 have left St. John in the past decade, creating an aging population that struggles to support essential services through property taxes. Schools close due to declining enrollment, while healthcare costs skyrocket as the remaining population gets older and requires more medical care. What you're witnessing in St. John reflects the broader economic challenges facing maritime Canada, where traditional industries collapse faster than new ones can replace them. The region's struggles seem uniquely Atlantic, but the reality is that Western Canada faces its own distinct urban disasters, proving that geography offers no protection from poor planning and economic mismanagement. Prince George, British Columbia. Western Canada's urban problems take on a distinctly different flavor when you examine Prince George, a northern British Columbia city where economic volatility and social issues create a perfect storm of livability challenges. This forestry-dependent community of 75,000 residents experiences crime rates that would shock urban dwellers in much larger cities, with violent crime occurring at nearly twice the national average. The drug crisis has transformed Prince George into something resembling a frontier town gone wrong. Fentanyl and methamphetamine addiction-fueled property, crimes that have businesses installing steel bars on windows and hiring private security guards. Downtown merchants report break-ins occurring so frequently that insurance companies either refuse coverage or charge premiums that exceed monthly rent costs. Economic instability amplifies every social problem. Prince George's economy rises and falls with global lumber prices, creating boom-bust cycles that devastate family planning and community stability. When mills shut down or reduce shifts, unemployment can spike from 5% to 15% within months, leaving thousands of families scrambling to pay mortgages and basic expenses. Winter isolation compounds these challenges in ways that Southern Canadians struggle to understand. From November through March, temperatures regularly drop below -20 degrees Celsius, limiting outdoor recreation and social activities that might provide healthy alternatives to substance abuse. The combination of economic stress, social problems, and seasonal depression creates a mental health crisis that overwhelms local healthcare resources. You can see the cumulative impact in population trends. Despite offering some of the highest-paying jobs in British Columbia during boom periods, Prince George struggles to retain young professionals who view the city as a place to make quick money before escaping to more stable communities. Prince George's remote location certainly amplifies its challenges, but distance from major centers isn't always the problem. Sometimes being too close to urban pressures creates entirely different forms of municipal stress. Hamilton, Ontario. Being close to major centers doesn't shield you from urban decay when industrial pollution and economic inequality poison daily life. Hamilton, Ontario sits just 45 minutes from Toronto, yet this proximity has created more problems than solutions for the 560,000 residents struggling with some of Canada's worst air quality and most dramatic wealth disparities. The steel industry that built Hamilton continues to choke it. Environment Canada monitoring stations regularly record air pollution levels that exceed federal health guidelines, with particulate matter concentrations reaching dangerous levels during summer months. Residents in neighborhoods surrounding the steel plants report asthma rates 30% higher than the provincial average, while children's emergency room visits for respiratory problems spike whenever industrial emissions combine with stagnant weather patterns. Housing affordability has reached crisis levels as Toronto's real estate market pushes buyers westward into Hamilton. The average home price has surged from $300,000 in 2015 to over $700,000 today, pricing out families who've lived in the city for generations. Meanwhile, poverty rates in core neighborhoods like the North End exceed 25%, creating stark contrast between gentrified areas and communities struggling with food insecurity. Traffic congestion compounds these problems as Hamilton becomes a bedroom community for Toronto commuters. The Red Hill Valley Parkway and Lincoln-Alexander Parkway, built to ease congestion, now operate at capacity during rush hours. While GO Transit trains are so overcrowded, that passengers regularly can't board during peak times. The economic transformation from blue-collar manufacturing to white-collar services has left thousands of workers behind, creating unemployment pockets that persist despite the city's proximity to one of North America's largest job markets. Hamilton's industrial past continues to shape its present in ways that limit future possibilities. But there's another Ontario city where explosive population growth has created infrastructure challenges that make Hamilton's problems seem manageable. Surrey, British Columbia. Explosive population growth can overwhelm infrastructure faster than any city can adapt, and Surrey proves this harsh reality with devastating consequences for its 590,000 residents. This sprawling British Columbia suburb has grown by 35% since 2010, making it Canada's fastest expanding major city, but municipal planning has failed spectacularly to keep pace with the human influx. Gang violence has turned Surrey into British Columbia's crime capital. The city records more shootings per capita than Vancouver, despite having a smaller population, with targeted killings occurring so frequently that residents describe gunfire as background noise in certain neighborhoods. Police statistics show that 87% of Surrey's homicides involve gang activity, creating an atmosphere of fear that keeps families indoors after dark. The education system buckles under demographic pressure. Surrey schools operate at 120% capacity, forcing students into portable classrooms that lack proper heating, lighting, and technology access. Class sizes regularly exceed 35 students, while parents face lottery systems just to enroll their children in neighborhood schools. The district estimates it needs 15 new schools immediately, but funding approvals take years while enrollment continues climbing. Transportation infrastructure tells an equally frustrating story. Highway 1 through Surrey experiences gridlock that can turn a 20-minute drive into a 2-hour ordeal during rush periods. The SkyTrain expansion that was supposed to solve transit problems won't reach key Surrey neighborhoods until 2030, leaving residents dependent on overcrowded buses that run hours behind schedule. The combination creates a perfect storm of urban dysfunction where rapid growth amplifies every municipal weakness. Families describe Surrey as a place where you spend hours commuting to work, worry about your children's safety at school, and pray your neighborhood doesn't become the next gang war battleground. Surrey's planning failures demonstrate how growth without infrastructure investment destroys livability, but even cities with established infrastructure and stable populations can experience dramatic decline when economic fundamentals shift. Halifax, Nova Scotia. Even established cities with stable populations can experience dramatic decline when economic fundamentals collide with housing speculation. Halifax, Nova Scotia's regional capital and home to 430,000 residents, has transformed from an affordable maritime gem into an unlivable, expensive nightmare where basic housing costs consume most people's income while job opportunities remain frustratingly limited. The housing crisis has reached catastrophic proportions. Halifax rental vacancy rate sits below 1%, the lowest in Canada, while median home prices have surged 35% in just 2 years, reaching levels that would have seemed impossible in a maritime city. Young professionals describe apartment hunting as a full-time job where landlords receive hundreds of applications for single units, often demanding first and last month's rent plus additional deposits that exceed $5,000. Economic opportunities haven't kept pace with housing costs. Halifax's job market remains dominated by government positions, healthcare, and service industries that pay wages far below what's needed to afford current housing prices. The average salary for university graduates hovers around $45,000 annually, while a typical one-bedroom apartment now rents for $1,800 monthly, consuming nearly half of take-home pay before considering utilities, food, or transportation. The brain drain accelerates as maritime youth abandon their home region for opportunities elsewhere. Statistics Atlantic reports that 62% of Nova Scotia University graduates leave the province within 5 years, seeking career prospects in Ontario or Western Canada, where salaries better match living costs. This exodus depletes Halifax of the young professionals needed to drive economic diversification and innovation. Local families describe a city where they can no longer afford to live, despite working full-time jobs, creating an economic displacement crisis that affects everyone from teachers to nurses to skilled tradespeople. Halifax struggles exemplify the broader challenges facing Atlantic Canada, but these regional problems pale in comparison to what you'll discover in our final city, where multiple urban disasters converge to create Canada's most unlivable municipal nightmare. Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Multiple urban disasters converge in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan to create Canada's most comprehensive municipal nightmare, where every aspect of city life seems designed to test human endurance. This prairie city of 275,000 residents holds the dubious distinction of having Canada's highest property crime rate, with over 12,000 incidents annually, meaning you're statistically more likely to be victimized here than anywhere else in the country. The crime statistics tell a story of urban decay that would shock residents of supposedly rougher cities. Break-ins occur at triple the national average, while car thefts happen so frequently that insurance companies charge premiums exceeding those in Toronto or Vancouver. Downtown Saskatoon empties after business hours as residents avoid areas where break-ins, assaults, and drug-related incidents dominate police call logs. Climate extremes amplify every urban problem. Saskatoon endures temperature swings from minus 40 degrees Celsius in winter to plus 35 degrees in summer, creating infrastructure maintenance costs that consume 40% of the municipal budget. Roads crack and buckle under thermal stress, water mains burst regularly during freeze-thaw cycles, and building maintenance costs exceed those of comparable cities by 50%. Economic diversity remains dangerously limited despite decades of attempted diversification. The economy still depends heavily on agriculture, potash mining, and resource processing, creating boom-bust cycles that devastate family planning and municipal finances. When commodity prices drop, unemployment can spike from 4% to 12% within months, leaving thousands struggling to afford basic necessities in a city where winter heating bills regularly exceed $400 monthly. Downtown revitalization efforts have failed spectacularly, with vacancy rates exceeding 30% in the core business district. Residents describe Saskatoon as a city where you constantly worry about crime, struggle with extreme weather, and face limited career prospects while paying costs comparable to much larger, more prosperous cities. The combination creates a quality of life that feels more like endurance than living, making Saskatoon the worst place to call home in Canada.